Welcome to another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. Rob Vino back in the house with us. I've seen him, of course, multiple times on this show as a guest. He's one of our favorite guests. I keep seeing people on the comments on the YouTube videos when you and I are doing these shows. When's Rob going to be on again? When's Rob going to be on again? So you're a popular guy. People like your analysis, and so do I. That's why we try to get you on every single month to talk football. We'll be talking the final week of the CFL regular season to start, and then we'll get into an assortment, a smorgasbord, if you will, of NFL and college football for the upcoming weekend. But Rob, how are you doing? Things good?
Everything's good, Ian. It's that time of year, right? I know you're in the same boat as me because we cover basically the same sports. Although I'll give you credit, you cover hockey, and I can't I can't handle covering hockey. But the NBA season has started. The college basketball season is about to start in a huge way on November 3rd. So it's our time of year for sure to kind of put sleep on the back burner. Some of these days just run together, but glad to be here. We do it because we love it, and hopefully we can point people in the right direction here on the show today.
Yeah, you nailed it. Thursday feels like Monday. Tuesday feels like Friday. Friday feels like Monday. I mean, we're at that time of year where it's just, you do the same, pretty much the same shit every day. So, it doesn't, one day just basically, you're right, just rolls into the next one. I know this is a football show, but I'll throw this out there because Rob posted the tweet about it last night and I've picked up on it. And when you're talking to two handicappers here where 99.9% of their totals bets are overs, they take note of this. And 12-2 to the over in the NBA. In the first two nights of the regular season. Pretty crazy numbers, Rob, with just these overs. And what I've noticed is the frenetic pace of some of these games and just almost the kamikaze, chaotic, frenetic, hectic style of basketball. I was watching a good chunk of Raptors Hawks last night. I mean, they're just like street ball almost. They're just diving for loose balls and they're flinging it down the court in rapid succession. And, there's before anybody can set up on defense. And it was just an unbelievable pace in that game. And I saw a bunch of those games very similar last night. So 12 out of 14 NBA games to the over, Rob, so far.
Yeah, for guys like us, that's a dream. It's no wonder I got off to a really good start in the NBA here. Although I will say I've treaded lightly to get to my 3-0 the first two nights. But you're right, Ian. I mean, and especially the game you described real quick, and we won't elaborate on NBA because, like you say, it's a football show. But Toronto gave us the inclination second half of last season that they were going to be one of those we're going to outscore you type teams. And the Hawks have always been that. Doesn't matter who they acquire, who leaves town, as long as Trae Young is there and as long as Quinn Snyder is there, it's going to be up and down. And it certainly was last night. Like you said, I'm just surprised that we're going to get to the openers of 240 plus real fast this year. Like within two games, we're going to be seeing 240. So it's a little bit different style now.
No doubt. So, like I said, high scoring start in the NBA. There's no doubt, and certainly good if you're an over better. All right, we will begin the football frenzy this week with CFL. We always start with CFL, but this is the final week of the CFL regular season. And for years when I handicap CFL final week, NFL final week of the regular season, which for them is week 18, for the CFL it's week 21, it's always that same approach where it's almost like, X's and O's and the matchups on the field take a back seat to situationals, to who needs the game, who's resting, who's starting, who's not. And all the different scenarios. So we'll go one by one through these games. The first game, I'll be there, of course. This is the fan appreciation night at Hamilton Stadium, and I'll be there, my final regular season visit to the old barn for the Ticats home and regular season finale. Friday night against the Ottawa Red Blacks. Hamilton 13.5-point home favorites, 52.5 the total in this game. Friends of mine are kind of disappointed that this game's going on at the same time as game one of the World Series with the Dodgers and the Blue Jays. Well, I said, don't worry. There's Wi-Fi in the stadium. I'll have my phone with me. I've got the IPTV subscription. We'll get the stream going of the baseball game on the phone, and we'll be watching that too at the football game, no doubt. We'll get that going for sure. You won't miss a pitch, I said, fellas, of the baseball game there. But this is interesting here, Rob, because Hamilton is one of these teams where it's been so up and down, and I've said this before about their 10-7 record. They're somehow going to win the East Division, but I'm telling you, the 10 wins, it's pretty crazy how many times they've beaten up on the Torontos of the CFL and the Ottawas of the CFL, and they got to face Montreal twice early in the season, once with McLeod Bethel Thompson, once with James Morgan. Never had to face Montreal with Davis Alexander at quarterback. Faced Winnipeg once at home with Chris Drevler, not Zach Collaros. It's just been a feast of, good matchups, beating weaker teams and beating teams that had backup third string quarterbacks. I mean, I hate to say that. I'd like to say something more positive, and I think they're a good team, but to act like they're an elite team, I don't think they're there. And we've seen them multiple times lose to the better teams. They've been swept by Calgary this year. When they played Winnipeg with Zach in Winnipeg, they bombed us. We got swept by Saskatchewan this year. So that's the issue I have with the Ticats, Rob. It's 10-7 based on bad teams and backup quarterbacks that you faced. The majority of the wins. Now, when it comes to this game, this could be a game they run away and hide, because for the Ottawa Red Blacks, it's a season that's been a disaster. Out of the playoffs weeks ago, I got to think there's probably going to be a coaching change, Rob, coming in Ottawa at the end of the season. I don't think Bob Dice is going to be back next year with this team. There's could be a lot of changes, and certainly this team has kind of looked like it and played like it. And last week with this Ottawa team, and I've been fading Ottawa a lot the last couple of weeks, no doubt. But last week, as frustrating as it was on Thanksgiving, and I know you were right there with me on this one, to lose that Montreal team total over on Thanksgiving, where they scored, almost got there, but didn't quite. And you could tell the offense was just not nearly as dialed in and sharp for Davis Alexander and the Alouettes. But I came back to it last week in the rematch in Ottawa. I had a piece of that. I had a piece of the -8 with Ottawa laying the points with the Alouettes. And I also had a Montreal double result bet, which is win the game and lead at halftime combined. So, and yet I never felt comfortable at any point, especially because here's Ottawa. Once they fell behind and in garbage time against a Montreal soft defense, prevents you from covering, as I often say. There's Tyree Adams, who got his first start for Ottawa last week, and he actually played okay. He had 3 touchdown passes. He had almost 300 passing yards. He had 3 interceptions, though, and that was critical and hurting Ottawa. But he also moved the football a good chunk in that game, and they still put up a lot of points. And, Montreal hung on for the cover, but it was not easy. And thankfully, Montreal scored all the points they did, or else that game could have been even closer. So when you're talking a number like this, it kind of feels like Ottawa's a dead corpse on the field. But there were moments that they didn't look that way against Montreal last week for the first time, especially their quarterback, Tyree Adams, who's going to start again here. He's playing for his career right now. He's playing for a job, and he certainly gave you that effort and that level of play that would indicate that last week. And it's not like this is the 85 Bears that Hamilton's trotting out there on defense. So it kind of makes me think that the Red Blacks might be able to score some points here. Hamilton should do a number, though, on Ottawa. You got to think Hamilton, off the miserable loss against Calgary, again, just unable to consistently string good days and good games together. Hamilton, that's been an issue at times. Remember, they beat up Toronto, and then they come back home against Calgary, and they lay an egg against Vernon Adams and the Stamps. The offense struggled. Defense got ripped apart through the air, on the ground by Dedrick Mills. Calgary did whatever they wanted to do, but now they're off that loss and the bye week. Home finale in front of the fans, and I think Bo Levi Mitchell and the offense can certainly have their way. Ottawa's given up points, hemorrhaging points every single week, points allowed, big plays given up. So that being said, I don't feel comfortable with the 13.5. I'm more comfortable, and I've said this before on the show a bunch, that when the bigger favorites, I'm interested in them, I prefer the team total. And the team total here's 32.5 for Hamilton in this game. You can hit 34, you can hit 35 here at home against this Ottawa team. I think they can do that. So I like the team total aspect of this game for Hamilton. Again, win and they clinch the East Division and a bye to the East Final. If they win this game, I think they can exceed their team total. I'm also going to get in on that 52.5 to the over, because I think Ottawa can do enough to help get there. If we can get 35 minimum out of Hamilton, which I think is firmly possible, can we get 20 from Ottawa here in this game with Tyree Adams? And look, they got well into the 20s last week against a pretty damn good Montreal team and a pretty damn good Montreal defense when they're on their game. I was impressed with Adams. He can move. He's got some mobility. Again, he's got to cut down the interceptions, but if you're betting full game over and Hamilton team total over, Rob, sometimes he can contribute points to the opposition as well, which would be good news in both counts. So that's the way I'm approaching this. I'm going to have a split between Ticats team total over 32.5 in this full game, over 52.5. I checked the weather. I'll be there. It'll be cool, but light wind, no precipitation. So weather shouldn't be a big deal tomorrow night in Hamilton. Rob, what do you think here? Red Blacks, Ticats.
Well, it's one of the two that I bet already, Ian, simply because we don't have as many unknowns with this one, right? This is the first game out of the box. And the first order of business for Hamilton is just to win the game. Let's win the division. Let's win the game. Let's win the division. The three ways, and I have three separate bets on this game. I bet Hamilton first half, -7.5, because like you say, when you're betting these end of regular season finale type games, and especially the situational stuff, what comes to mind is the home team, the large favorite, fast out of the chute, and let's get our players off the field as soon as we can so we're healthy for the playoffs, right? So I played first half -7.5, and I played their team total over 16.5 points in the first half, figuring that was a pretty good way to go with Hamilton. The third way I bet the game is the same as you. I played it over the 52.5. Just off of watching Ottawa last week. And again, I understand that last week was Ottawa's season home finale. But still, you mentioned a bunch of stuff that I was thinking were across the same lines here, where Tyree Adams playing for a job. Tyree Adams, no give up in him at the end of the game. Tyree Adams, 3 interceptions last week, but a game under his belt now. Maybe those go away a little bit. And Ottawa still has a dynamic receiving core. I mean, Addison, you got Eugene Lewis, you got Pimpleton. These guys can all make big plays. So, my line of thinking, Ian, was Hamilton early in a big way. If they do decide to pull the plug on it after 3 quarters, Ottawa may be able to contribute that touchdown in the fourth that gets us over the hump where total is concerned. I think those are the ways for me to go here. And again, simply because we know a little bit more about what's going to go on in this game than we do in some of the others.
Yeah, where the permutations and the scenarios and the possibilities get a lot murky. Especially with the 3 teams out west that could finish second, third, or fourth in the West Division. And of course, the 4th place team in the West crosses over into the eastern side of the bracket in the CFL Grey Cup playoffs to play, well, presumably Montreal. But this is Hamilton, and I've seen us have some shockingly bad losses over the. This would take the cake, right? This Ottawa dead as a corpse team that's been eliminated weeks ago, and we can't clinch the division at home. That would be brutal. That's not going to be a happy fan base if they somehow lost this game. I don't think that's going to happen, but if it did, boy, oh boy, not going to be a pretty scene there at the old stadium on Friday night. But I do think there's points. I've got that probably something like 38-21, I think, Hamilton. I think that's probably a plausible final score on Friday night with the Red Blacks and Ticats. Yeah, this game's a tricky one. You got Calgary, Edmonton. Calgary, 5-point road favorites, 53.5 the total in this game. The one thing I'll mention with the scenarios here, West Division. So as Calgary can finish second in the West and host BC in the Western semifinal, if they win, there's a bunch of things. They win first is what has to happen. A Winnipeg win and a BC tie as well. They can also win and get a Winnipeg loss and a BC tie or loss. Keep in mind, too, there's also a scenario where BC can host Calgary in the West semifinal if BC just wins against Saskatchewan. So for Calgary, they're going to need Winnipeg to do something here to help with that result, but it's not going to matter if BC just beats Saskatchewan when it's all said and done. Bottom line for Calgary is I think you're going to take the field wanting to win, and hoping to win. And just based on the fact, throw out the permutations for a minute, Rob, that the last 2 weeks, Calgary's played like a team with a purpose. They smacked Hamilton against a Toronto team that had actually been pretty feisty in recent games, despite being eliminated. They just waxed Toronto last week in that game against the Argos. So, like I said, Calgary's kind of gotten back on track. They snapped the losing streak, starting to play better football down the stretch, trying to ramp up going into the playoffs. Dave Dickinson and crew. And I don't know what we're going to get from Edmonton. They battled so hard. It was such a valiant just battle right till the bitter end for Mark Killam, for Cody Fajardo, and the rest of the Edmonton Elks. And the playoff dream came to an end last week with the loss to BC. And I know it's their home finale. And, sometimes you want to still, even though you've been eliminated, put on a good final performance in front of the home fans. But the fact remains, you know, the defense now has reverted back to the way it was playing at times early in the season. They're going to be without Curly Gittens Jr., who's been one of their better receivers of late. In fact, was leading them in receiving yards last week before he got injured late in that game against BC. So that's one of Cody's top weapons, that he's not going to be not going to have on the field. The Stampeder defense, Bob Slowick's team was leaking oil for a bit, but they played better against Hamilton, shut down, albeit a limited Toronto offense, and obviously, down the depth chart with their quarterback situation. But still, it's been a better 2 weeks for Calgary's defense. I don't know. I'd lay it if I had to, but I haven't moved on this game yet. Not sure I will. What do you think here, Rob? Calgary, Edmonton.
Well, I'm with you. I'm absolutely with you. And I don't know that I will move on this game. The one thing that holds me back, Ian, and it could be to what you said, that maybe Edmonton is just out of gas at this point in time, but it's a 7-10 team that is, hold on here. I just lost the number. They're a 7-10 team. The point is going to be that they're the best value team, or most undervalued team in the league. So they're a 7-10 team that's 11-6 against the spread, which tells you that the odds maker has constantly undervalued Edmonton all season long. A lot of that's due more to effort out of the Elks than it is having talent advantages each and every week. But home season finale, you would expect the effort, 60 minutes. I feel like you're going to get 60 minutes out of Edmonton no matter what. Last week,
it's still a rivalry game because they play this team every year on Labor Day. That's one of their their biggest rivalry, Calgary. So you hopefully like to think, if you're an Elk fan, you're going to that stadium thinking, not going to roll over just based on who you're playing.
Yeah, so possibly a little bit of emotional aspect to add to it for the Elks here as they go out, being a non-playoff team this year. To me, in watching that game last week with Calgary and Toronto, it seemed to me that Toronto was a team on the road in their season finale in just give up mode. Like, we've had it. Ran a bunch of quarterbacks out there last week. I think 3 guys played. No, I think it's Tucker Horn out there as the 4th-team QB last week. So the score, while it looks impressive, I don't know exactly how impressive it was. We've talked about Vernon Adams not really being the same Vernon Adams this year as he has been in the past. Does that come back here on the road? I'm not sure, but he's thrown some questionable interceptions this season. I have a hard time laying it with Calgary in this instance, even though when you break it down, they probably should be the right side at this price tag. But again, I keep alluding to the 11-6 ATS mark against Edmonton. Somehow, some way, in, let's say, the last 5-6 games of the season, while overmatched, they were covering numbers. And I could see them coming within 3 or 4 points here in this game, being a late victory for Calgary. So I haven't played, mainly because I don't have the guts to take the dog. I mean, I sit here and I lay out the case, and then I don't have the guts to pull the trigger. So that's where I'm at in that game.
Yeah, I think so. By the way, too, it's not just Gittens at receiver. Jared Brinkman, one of their best defensive linemen. Brinkman and Serezna have been the backbone of that defensive front for Edmonton, and they're not going to have Brinkman in this game, it looks like. So that's a concern. A couple of other starters might miss for Edmonton, but that's also something that would bother me about taking the points with them. So, like I said, I don't think I'm getting involved in it, but obviously, Calgary's still playing for that second place in the West Division, which would get them a home game hosting the West semifinal next week. All right, let's go to Saturday. Montreal, Winnipeg. Winnipeg, 5.5-point home favorites, 49.5 the total. There's absolutely no way you can move on this game until you see what happens in Hamilton on Friday night, because this becomes a moot point, this game, for Montreal if Hamilton wins. Montreal's locked into second. They're going to host the East semifinal next week, next Saturday, if Hamilton locks up the division Friday night against Ottawa, which I expect them to. So then you could see Jason Moss just decide, out you go, Davis Alexander, you're not playing. Or if you are playing, maybe you get in for a snap or a possession or two, but you're certainly not playing more than a quarter or a half, if that, in a game like this. And you're going to see the hybrid of McLeod Bethel-Thompson or James Morgan after that. Or maybe Cam Dukes, although I think they might have cut Cam Dukes, but you're going to see just a slew of backup quarterbacks and probably backup starters for Montreal in this game for majority, if not all of it, if Hamilton clinches the division. So I think it's a situation where you got to absolutely hold off on it. And not to mention from a Winnipeg standpoint, they're in that, barrage of teams with Calgary and BC. From a Winnipeg standpoint, what do they need to have happen as far as their situation is concerned? They doesn't look like they can host a West semifinal. It's basically going to be whether they are going to stay on the Western side and be on the road in the West semifinal, or if they're going to be the crossover team and play Montreal in the East semifinal, which is very much a possibility here in this game. So this is definitely one to wait for. I mean, here's the thing with Winnipeg. I took them I got a good number on them last week, -6 against Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan resting everybody, clinching the West last week. And Winnipeg's life and death to win that game. And Zach Collaros was not good. The offense was not good. And it was a struggle. They couldn't get things going. They just could not string good drives together in that game. And credit to Saskatchewan and Corey Mace. They played hard and they made life difficult. Their defense on Winnipeg. And they got enough offensive production to make that a very, very close game and one that Winnipeg, just got out of there with a win, even though they had all the advantages in the world on their side in that game, including Saskatchewan resting everybody. So even if this game means zilch to Montreal, it's not the easiest move to make with Winnipeg -5.5 based on what I saw last week in that lackluster performance against Saskatchewan. So as of now, I'm not involved. What I will say is, if the Ticats win, obviously Alouettes are locked into the 2 seed in the East. They'll host the East semifinal. But if the Stampeders win against Edmonton, and we'll know that by the time this game kicks off, because that's a Friday night game, Calgary-Edmonton. If Calgary wins, Winnipeg becomes a very strong candidate to cross over to face Montreal in the East semifinal last week. And if by the time this game kicks off, if we know for sure that it's going to be Montreal hosting Winnipeg in the East semifinal next week, who the hell is going to want to show their cards in this game? If you're Mike O'Shea for Winnipeg, if you're Jason Moss for Montreal, this could be one of these games where it's all the starters. If they know taking the field, we're facing each other in the East semifinal in Montreal next week. It could be get the starters out of here, both sides, offense, defense, get Strevler in there and Terry Wilson, the Kentucky quarterback, who's also on this Winnipeg roster, get them in there for this game. On Montreal, get McLeod and James Morgan in there for the Alouettes, and let's just vanilla it up, not show anything, get this game over with, keep everyone healthy, and move on to next Sunday, because there is a possibility this game starts and we already know it's Als Bombers next Sunday in the East semifinal. That is something to keep filed away in the back of your mind here, Rob. What do you think? Alouettes Bombers.
Well, I felt like I violated a rule here, Ian, when you said you can't possibly bet this game before we know you. I've already bet it. So I thought, oh man, I must have violated the code here by betting. But I bet the total under 49.5 just as a proactive approach here for a ton
That's
of the
probably the
reasons
move
that you just laid out. If it does become a known fact that it's going to be Montreal, Winnipeg next week, this total is going to go down by 3 points, 4 points. I mean, everybody's going to pile on under because you described what the game will be. It'll be a handoff fest. It's interesting because you came to mind this week when I was doing my Excel spreadsheet box score work, and I saw Saskatchewan only ran 41 plays from scrimmage last week. And I thought, we were talking about the rule changes, right? How referees take a long time and some of these plays take 1:20. It could be one of those games for sure. Nobody's going to want to show their hand. Nobody's going to want to get hurt. And so if you just in your head, if you say, figure out the probabilities of Calgary winning and this matchup rehappening next week, it's not a bad approach to take. Just run right out now and bet under. And even if, Ian, because this is where I had to go with my handicap, even if this game becomes meaningful, Do you still want to bet over 49.5 with these two teams? The defenses are probably going to be the best units on the field. It still may be, I read something this week, and I don't buy into conspiracy theories a lot, but, does Winnipeg want to cross over and be part of the East? And it's maybe an easier path for them. I don't know if that goes on. I wouldn't think at home you're trying to lose the game so you can get to the East, but my point being that this could be a lower scoring game than 49.5, even if it's meaningful. So I took that approach. I played it. Winnipeg, Montreal under the 49.5.
I think that's the right way. I think if you're going to get involved at all, that's the move to make. All right, BC, Saskatchewan, final game. BC 7.5-point road favorites, 51.5 the total. I was wondering where this line would go. Would people, just think Saskatchewan is just going to roll over and get ready for the playoffs? Because I actually took the Riders here plus the points, and it's actually moved toward Saskatchewan a little bit here, plus 7.5. Corey Mace has kept his lips sealed, Go-Go's style, as far as his playing time here for the starters. What I will say, Rob, is I know Winnipeg was not good last week and they struggled, but I think it's pretty impressive that Saskatchewan rolled out a team with no A.J. Ouellette, no Sam Emilus, no Dante Myers, no Keyshawn Johnson, no Jamarcus Hardrick, who's one of their best offensive linemen, no Kean Schaefer-Baker, no Trevor Harris, of course, at quarterback last week. And they still took Winnipeg in a game they needed and wanted down to the wire. That tells me Corey Mace coaches up effort, coaches up every game's an opportunity, no matter who's in the lineup, no matter who's on the football field. Coaching is what I believe in here, and taking Saskatchewan plus 7.5. That no game is I remember Jim Morris Sr., someone coach went off saying it's a nothing game, and they just went off to the media talking about, it's what do you mean it's a nothing game? There's no such thing as it's a nothing game. And the coach lost his mind. I think Corey Mace kind of feels that way. He certainly coaches that way, because to coach up that team to play like they did against Winnipeg, I was damn impressed. And all the criticism I've given Jake Mayer, he actually played a solid game last week against Winnipeg there. And say that he's not, he lost his spot in Calgary because he didn't play well, as a starting quarterback. But he's still a guy that's played a lot of games in this league. And he played a decent game last week. And for BC, there's a possibility they already know where they're finishing when this game starts Saturday night against Saskatchewan. Not for sure. They might still they might take the field this final game of the regular season Saturday night and be in a spot where a win gets them that West semifinal home game. But there's also a possibility that they already know they're maybe finishing on the road or going on the road next week in the West semifinal, locked into who they're playing, and this game becomes an exhibition game for them too. So I'm okay taking Saskatchewan, just thinking Mace will coach up effort, backups and second and third stringers will be ready to go. You got to have maybe some Jake Mayer, a little maybe Jack Cohn as well, the former Notre Dame quarterback. Wisconsin, I think he played for a little bit too in college, but he's also on this roster. He got some time in certain plays last week against Winnipeg as well. Coach him up. The effort was still very high, very, very commendable for the Riders last week, and that's what I'm banking on here. Effort being enough to stay within one score. Not Alex. Alex is my colleague on the Ice Guys. This is Rob Vino. Rob, what do you think here? BC, Saskatchewan.
Yeah, I'm with you on all counts here, Ian. This is the one where I have to just push pause for a second and see what the results are, because it does make a difference in how these two teams play the game. I'll say this for where Saskatchewan is concerned. Last week, 11 first downs, 177 total yards, did absolutely nothing offensively. Didn't actually go out there to do anything offensively, but still kept the game close, because Winnipeg is just such a dull knife as far as offense is concerned. BC is not that. If they really want to, against a backup defense, they could score points, but we just don't know, right? We just don't know at this point in time. So it's hard for me to take the risk with British Columbia on the road in this game, knowing that, again, this is probably a matchup that's going to happen in the West, right? It's going to be BC Saskatchewan at some point. So I think you said it best in the beginning, Ian. It's more about keeping guys healthy at this point in time. I think BC knows who they are, what they are. Saskatchewan certainly knows who they are, what they are. And until we know a couple of the earlier results, and that doesn't even mean I'll get involved, but if I do get involved, it'll be because I know what the scenario is going to be for this game. So I haven't bet this one yet.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, it would be. I've already moved on Saskatchewan. Like even if it means something for BC, I think this could be competitive, but not a given that that's going to be the case. And if it doesn't mean anything for BC, there is no chance Nathan Rourke is playing. Obviously, in this game, he's going to be their meal ticket to the Grey Cup because every quarterback matters. I'd argue he matters as much, if not more, to this particular BC Lions team than anybody else. That means you're going to see some combination. If this game means nothing to BC, you're going to see some combination of Jeremiah Masoli and Chase Bryce, who played little at Duke, little at App State, little at Clemson. I remember back in the day. He was in a bunch of places in college, Chase Bryce. But yeah, Chase Bryce and Jeremiah Masoli are the backup quarterbacks in BC. They would get into the game if Nathan Rourke doesn't play.
And if that happens, Ian, you have closing line value to the hilt because that line will go down. If Rourke doesn't play, it's probably 3.5.
Yeah.
I mean,
Jeremiah Masoli was a premier quarterback in the CFL 3, 4, 5 years ago. But yeah, the times I've seen him in this year, and briefly earlier in right. There were some rough moments for him. You could tell it's just the injuries and it's just completely debilitated him. At this stage, and it's sad because he had a really good career going earlier. All right, let's turn to college football, little NFL. Just quickly on because this is going to be a video that's going to be good for shelf life all weekend. So just quickly on Thursday night NFL, Rob, did you have any opinion at all? Vikings Chargers, not best bet material, but I grabbed a little over 44.5, and just because of the fact that Chargers defense, I don't know what's happened to the Chargers defense, but Washington and the last 3 games, they've given up 27 plus points. And I know Daniel Jones and JT, Jonathan Taylor, and the Colts offense is resurgent this year. But boy, oh boy, to see them go up and down the whole game with no answer from the Chargers was stunning to me last week. That the defense has suddenly got some real issues for Jim Harbaugh. The offense was the concern going into the Colts game. I'll say Herbert managed the O-line problems well. Got the ball out quickly, and if not for some of these turnovers in the red zone for Herbert, they could have put up more points than they did against the Colts, and they might have Joe Alt back. Joe Alt's been talking all week long like he wants to play, expects to play, and what a huge boost that would be for a ravaged Chargers offensive line going into this game. Minnesota's defense has kind of been torched. Rodgers and the Steelers had success. I think Gabriel over in Europe for Cleveland actually made a decent account of himself against Minnesota, first game of his career. And then we saw Jalen Hurts, a passing game that had been pretty stagnant. A.J. Brown screaming to get the ball more, upset, having a tantrum, and all's well because he faced the Minnesota secondary last week and torched them in that game. So the Vikings defense is, they don't get home with their blitz heavy scheme with Flores. They're very susceptible. We're finding that out right now, no question. And then there's Wentz. I know he's starting, no McCarthy yet, but Wentz is a guy that can give gifts to over-bettors on both ways. He can score for his team. He can score for the other team. You're always guaranteed a potential pick six, like he threw against the Eagles. And I think Khalil Mack might play tonight for the Chargers, which would be a boost for their pass rush. Make a difference, obviously. And, you could get a pick six to help your cause with the over here from Wentz because he's pretty good at that, especially when he's under pressure. So 44.5, 24-21 cashes you a ticket. If it hits 45, key number. So thought it was worth a look at the number we're given. Anything you like, Rob, for Thursday night NFL action, Vikings Chargers?
Yeah, I couldn't talk you off the full game over. I'd probably prefer the Chargers team total over here. 23.5 is the number there against this Viking defense, like you mentioned. But more than that, Ian, you talked about Joe Walt, and the other side of the coin is Minnesota could be again without their starting offensive tackles. This Christian Darrisaw injury just continues to linger and linger and linger, and he's on a limited snap count, and now he's not practicing. And Brian O'Neill on the other side has had limited practice time this week, and it is a short work week on a Thursday night. And we've seen Minnesota with these patchwork offensive lines multiple times this year, most notably in that Atlanta game where Atlanta just did whatever they wanted defensively to shut Minnesota down. They're still a little confused as to who's going to start at quarterback here. I don't often do it, but I kind of factored in a Minnesota offensive miscue to help the Chargers scoring here. But in the long run, I think Herbert and the receiving core here for the Chargers against that Minnesota defense, like you say, they played Philly last week, who had done nothing throwing the football all season long other than a second half against the Rams when they were in scramble mode. And all of a sudden, Jalen's got a perfect passer rating, and he's throwing for over 300 yards. Devontae Smith is wide open. So for me, it was Chargers team total. potentially the Chargers. I mean, they haven't played good enough for me to play them as a favorite, but I think they can score. Let's put it that way. So some form of total. My choice was Chargers team total.
Yeah, and it looks like this is going to go down to the wire with both of those linemen from Minnesota on the offensive line with Darisaw and Brian O'Neill. True game time decisions, it looks like, for this game tonight. And the early reports I'm reading are not optimistic, but they're still not going to rule them out until they absolutely have to. And it looks like key defender still out for Minnesota too. As Chris, this is all Chris Berman. He came up with this one. Rip Van Ginkel. Talking about Andrew Van Ginkel for Minnesota, that he's going to be out again for the Vikings. And that guy's really, from the days he was with Miami, he's gotten better and better, that guy on the defensive side of the football. So that is a loss for Minnesota as far as their defense is concerned for tonight. All right, we'll start with, we'll go to college football next. Obviously, we've got, the games on Friday and the big slate on Saturday. We'll just throw out an assortment of games that we like for the Saturday college football card. Actually, you know what? We'll talk specifically about a couple of the big games first on the Saturday slate. Obviously, one of them is Missouri-Vanderbilt, right? We got Vanderbilt 2.5-point home favorites, 53 the total in this game. I think situational handicapping has got to be part of the process. For me, this is a game where I say throw it out because I think it's a wash. Yes, Vanderbilt's coming off a huge win on ABC national TV against LSU last week, and they've had a grueling schedule. They had to play Alabama too before that. But you counter that, Missouri's coming off home game against Alabama where they fell short, and they got taken right to the brink there by Auburn in a grueling, exhausting game that went into the late night hours against Auburn last week in overtime that they survived and found a way to win that game. So I think it's not the best spot for either team. Maybe neither team is all that fresh going into this one. So you factor that out and you just think, who do you think's the better team? Who do you think's going to have the advantage? And at less than a field goal, I like Vanderbilt and Pavia at home a little bit more than Perbula and this Missouri team going on the road for a second straight week. Rob, what do you think there, Mizzou and Vandy?
Yeah, you used the word fresh right there, and that perfectly fits my reasoning here for playing this game over 53. There's multiple reasons, but I think this game's going over for Missouri. Just again, for those who don't know, I'm somewhat close to the program just because my youngest went to Mizzou, so we get a little bit of information. I do a show in Como, Columbia, Missouri, each and every week. We can pick the host.
Those Mizzou connects. Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah. And the defense is a little bit worn down at this point in time. They had that nice scheduling, right? 6 home games in a row. Bama comes in. That's a rough one for your defense. You go to Auburn. That's a physical game, as you talked about. And Vandy, the same thing. Vandy's defense was never really as good as Missouri's to begin with, but it's still worn down at this point in time. And both offenses are really good. I say this about Diego Pavia every single week. It didn't pan out against Alabama, but it pans out almost all the time. He can that team can score on anybody. And if you're going to go against a defense that's been softened up a little bit, they'll score their points at home. And I think Perbula, Vanderbilt's going to have to tackle Hardy, the running back for Mizzou, who is an absolute bowling ball. So not in size, but you know what I mean. The contact balance and they doesn't quite have the Ashton Genty long range speed or long end speed, but he's a tough tackle. So 53 looks so low to me in this one, Ian, that I had to play it over. That's the way I like that game the best.
Yeah, I can see it. And Vanderbilt, still they don't play fast, but boy, they've been efficient. What can overcome pace or lack of it? It's big plays and efficiency. Big plays and efficiency. And Vanderbilt has been giving you that. They gave you that against LSU. No question about that. You're right about the defense, as we start to see, Alabama had success. LSU, which had offensive struggles with Nussmeier, and suddenly they have a pretty good offensive showing, even in a losing effort last week against Vandy. So there's some questions there. And I think Missouri's defense, you're right. They've struggled more against the better teams and better offenses. They'll probably have a hard time with the absolute bulldog. That's the perfect word for Diego Pavia, bulldog. That's what he is. That guy plays with such reckless advantage. Fun player to watch with the emotion and the effort he gives. On every single play. Him and Haynes King, too, for Georgia Tech. They're very similar, in that regard. I'll just throw this one out at you here. Did you get to the over with Baylor Cincy? I did. What did you think there?
I, I looked at it and had to think twice, think three times, and now I'm thinking four times. I mean, 67 is a long way to go, but absolutely. These quarterbacks here, oh my goodness, what years have been put together here? I think Sorsby for Cincinnati has, I'm doing this off the top of my head, Ian, because I don't have the number in front of me, but I think I read it was a 17 or 18 to 1 TD to interception number so far this year for Brandon Sorsby, sort of a dual threat quarterback for Cincy. I know folks don't get a lot of chances to watch Cincinnati on television, but if you had, you know what I'm talking about. This offense is, it can be frenetic pace. It's not always frenetic pace.
I
It's
got to
more,
throw. I just want to say one thing before you continue. How
yeah,
frustrated you're happy as you're happier than a pig in shit right now. If you're Indiana fan with Signetti, he's done a great job. But how frustrating is it looking back that you had Brendan Sorsby in that program and
yeah.
you had Michael Penix Jr. in that program, and you couldn't get quality play and consistency out of them. And there were some injuries, especially with Penix, but you couldn't get those guys to play well. And now you see Sorsby and Cincy, and then Penix went to Washington with DeBoer and had this great college career. You got to look back on that and say, what the hell did Indiana fail to do with Sorsby and Penix? And look at Sorsby now. He's having his best season yet.
Yeah, what they did was they had a defensive-minded head coach in Tom Allen, and it didn't
Yeah.
work out very well
Yeah.
for those guys. Signetti's done an amazing job there. Now Fernando Mendoza, I mean, he was with Justin Wilcox at Cal. He's okay. He's here with Signetti. He's the number one draft pick in some people's minds right now. But to the point of this game, Ian, it's going to be, Cincinnati, they don't come with the reputation of being an aerial attack team, but they move the ball through. They're so balanced. It's crazy. And if you look at the NCAA leaders, team leaders in yards per play, Cincinnati's right up there. They do it in chunk and bulk yardage. Baylor doesn't stop anybody. Cincy's defense doesn't really stop anybody. I know why the total is this high. It's just I got to wrap my head around trying to get the 70 in that game, 35 aside or 34 aside to get there.
Yeah, I agree. It's a high number, but I still got in on it at 67. I think is the number I got on it. I still think we can get there. I'm going to go back to old reliable for an over as well. All but one game for this squad has gone over the total this year, and it was a game that should have went over. The one that stayed under should have went over, and then that Kaliak Manis threw an interception in the end zone against Washington, and that game goes over. I'm on that Rutgers Purdue. I don't know what happened to Ryan Brown and the Purdue offense last week against Northwestern, obviously getting goose-egged by Northwestern. Not a good look. They were moving the ball. The offense was at least somewhat capable before that. You got to hope against this miserable, horrific Rutgers Scarlet Knights defense that they can get it going here, especially at home. But we know the defense is still pretty lackluster for Barry Odoms and his crew. So, yeah, another Rutgers over for me. What say you, Rob?
Yeah, I'm with you. Obviously, with Purdue this week, we won't get Brian Brown. We're going to get the backup QB here,
Oh, yeah,
more
it
of a
took
dual
over.
threat.
Yep.
But still produced with the offense last week. And let's face it, Rutgers doesn't stop anybody. At this point in time, they stop nobody. For Rutgers, on the other side of the coin, Kaliak Manis and company, I think Ian Strong, the starting wide receiver for Rutgers, has a little bit of a question mark next to his name. He's the number one receiver and what's a very good receiving core. But everything I read, Ian, seems to indicate that he'll play in this game. So you have these two teams that can get up and down the field. Nobody can stop anybody. For Rutgers, this is going to be a significant step down in defensive class. You just got slaughtered by Oregon, who you couldn't do anything against, really. And now you get Purdue, who doesn't, Northwestern, all they did last week was hand the football off and go for like 250 plus on the ground. Rutgers, if they can balance it out, is probably due for 35, and Purdue at home can probably get to 30 against this defense. I'm with you. I played it. It took me an extra day to play it simply because I wanted to make sure Strong was available at wide receiver. And you do the best you can in this business a lot of times, right? Because you don't want to wait sometimes till final confirmation because you don't get the same number. But I was worried about Strong. Like I say, reading between the lines, it looks like he's a go. So over 59 for me there.
And I'm with the money that's moved this side for an SEC action. I'm a believer, Rob, sometimes, and when a team's giving it their all and the effort's there and they're grinding and they're so close to victory, and time again, they fall short and they just did brutal fashion. And eventually you let go of the rope, you hit a wall, and there's nothing left to give. I'm worried this could be that spot for Hugh Freeze's Auburn group. when you look at all the tough loss, the Georgia loss where they got screwed on that call. It was a controversial call, but they called it no touchdown. I still think it probably did cross the goal line. And Georgia, it was a different game from that point on when Auburn had dominated the first half there. And then we saw them just, incredible effort to battle Missouri tooth and nail last week and to lose on another gut-wrenching loss overtime. And I'll say this about Petrino and Arkansas on the other side, resurgent effort from Arkansas these last couple weeks. Great effort. Gave Tennessee a battle, gave A&M a battle last week. The defense still stinks, but they're scoring points with Talon Green, and that offense with Petrino in the interim role is working. I get why this money's come in on Arkansas. I think there's a tricky spot. You worry about Auburn's mentality and their psyche with all these crushing losses they've endured and just the rigorous schedule that the SEC provides. Now, there is rain in the forecast in Fayetteville for this game. I think the Arkansas Razorbacks get a victory, though. I think there's a really challenging get your team off the mat spot for Auburn, for Hugh Freeze. He's got to try to pick his guys up, and I don't know if it's going to be possible to do that. Rob, what do you think there, Auburn, Arkansas?
Yeah, it's not the only game this week, Ian, where I had to stop in my tracks because of weather forecast. Like you say, this one, I was all set to hit the button over 55.5. And last chance, I just checked the weather and I saw the rain. I held back. But for Jackson Arnold, for that receiving core, for Auburn, for their ground game, this is a defense where you can at least put up numbers. And even when mindsets are bad, I feel like guys who play offense, whether it be football or basketball, still want their numbers, even if the team is going sour. We talked about defenses in Missouri and Vanderbilt that have been kind of worn down, ground down, and Auburn was living on their defense all season long. And you just mentioned the games and the opponents that they've had to face. I think it's taken a toll on the defensive side of the football here. But again, the one thing you can probably hang your hat on is Arkansas is not going to stop anybody. Bobby Petrino and Talon Green are going to score points. It doesn't really matter who the opponent is. If I can just get a little bit better weather forecast, I don't even so much mind a little bit of light rain. At 55.5 just seems very low in an Arkansas game where Jackson Arnold, who's been, I'm going to be kind and say hit or miss this season, right? I think he'll probably have more hits in this game against this defense, which would push it over the total. And I can totally understand the side you're on. I wouldn't talk anybody off of playing Arkansas at home in this instance. Petrino, I think, he's trying to earn that full-time job. So he needs a couple of wins here. And this is one that he can probably get.
This is one he's got a chance to get. I would agree with that. Okay, sometimes the trend is your friend, and I'm going to buy into that with the Sunflower State showdown, Kansas State, Kansas. Kansas State's just owned this Kansas team. And this goes back to when Bill Snyder was the coach there all those years ago. And Bill Snyder would just crush this Kansas team. And this is going back to when he was coaching there. This goes back all the way to your Mark Manginos of the world were coaching Kansas a long time ago. And they just lay a butt kicking on Kansas every year. So it's an eye-opener that Kansas is laying 3.5 here against Kansas State. So I took a little K-State there with 3 in the hook. And they are playing better in recent weeks. Offensively, at least. Defense is still a little shaky, but K-State plus 3.5. I said, well, Kansas never beats this team. What do you think there, Rob? K-State and Kansas.
Well, I've got one rule with Kansas State, and it's funny because I just talked about games that involve rain, and this is one of them. It's going to rain constantly throughout the game, but the forecast is light rain. This year, there's not been 2 teams better to me playing overs. Didn't work out last week with Air Force, but Kansas State and Air Force just mechanically knee-jerk, start betting overs. Cash 3 in a row with K-State. They had a bye week last week, so they come in here pretty fresh. That offense is really good when Dylan Edwards can play. They had played early on this season, way back to the Ireland game where they sustained a couple of these offensive injuries without key personnel at wide receiver, at running back. I mentioned Dylan Edwards. When they're all together in a group, they've been very, very good. Last 3 games, 54, 69, 69 as far as full game totals are concerned, where they've reached. And here against Kansas, it's the same thing. I mean, Kansas is an offensive machine without a defense. For K-State, by the way, just to add to the offensive prowess, let's say, for this game, they'll be without their top pass rushing defensive end. They don't play a lot of defense to begin with. All I ever ask for in a Kansas State game is Avery Johnson might be the most frustrating quarterback in America for me to watch with all the talent that he has. And I'm constantly sitting here behind this desky and looking up at these monitors during a college football Saturday watching him and just asking, please just hit the gimmies for me. If all you do is hit the gimmies, the offense is going to roll. And so often he doesn't. It gets bothersome, but somehow, some way, K-State, especially in that TCU game, they find ways to score points and allow points. So for me, it's over the number in that game, unless the rain becomes something that's going to be a problem.
I've been fading Nebraska multiple weeks as favorites, and I'm doing it again with Northwestern plus 7.5. Northwestern started out rough. Was really aghast with how bad they looked against Tulane, but I know the competition's not been great lately, but they've started to put some things together, playing a little bit better. Preston Stone, not great, but he's certainly stepped it up a little bit from the way he was playing early in the season. The defense is starting to slowly piece things together and get a little bit better week in and week out. And I know Purdue lost Ryan Brown and had to go to a backup quarterback last week, but Northwestern's showing an uptick. And how many times do you have to be let down with Nebraska as a favorite before you figure it out? Because you look at the last few weeks, Maryland survived barely as a road favorite. You saw them against Michigan State, big favorites. That game was tied in the fourth quarter. They could have lost that game against Michigan State. And then last week against Minnesota, blown off the field as a 7-point road favorite against the Gophers Friday night last week. It's really that simple for me. Nebraska with a minus 7.5 next to their name. Give me the opponent. Anything there you like.
Well, I think if you like the other side here, if you do like the Northwestern side, what's encouraging is that Nebraska, when they play teams that can run the football, they've run on them. We just talked about how Northwestern handed it off and ran for 250 against Purdue. Nebraska's run defense a little bit better than Purdue. But to your point, Minnesota gained 186 on the ground last week. If Northwestern's able to do that, Michigan gained 286 on the ground against this team. If Northwestern's able to sustain drives because they can run the football, then you know the deal, Ian. It's going to be a condensed 60 minutes, and plus 7.5 looks even larger in those styles games. I don't know how you feel about Dylan Raiola, the quarterback of Nebraska, but to me, it seems to me he's a little more hype than substance.
He's ham and egger. That's what he is. He's a ham and egger quarterback. Doesn't do it for me. No, I agree with that. I would agree with that. How much time have you got, Rob? Just quickly, how much time?
We can go another 6-7 minutes here. I think
Perfect.
I have 3:18.
Perfect. All right. Well, we'll let you throw out a couple NFL games that you like on the way out, and also just a couple more on the college side. I'm going to grab with those cowbells, how scary they can be sometimes at home. Mississippi State. It's just more so I'm going to dare Texas to finally on the road beat someone by margin again last week against Kentucky. My God. Life and death. Manning, again, very underwhelming at the quarterback spot. Offense can't get out of their own way. Barely survived Kentucky. That's not exactly what I want to see out of a 7-point road. And Mississippi State, Jeff Lebby's got them pointing upward a little bit. Competitive loss in overtime to Tennessee in this stadium. They go on the road, and they very nearly beat Florida last week. They're getting better, this program. Shapen's a good enough quarterback. I just think Texas, with what I'm seeing, they're not a team I trust in that role. So Mississippi State as a home dog, I'm interested there. BYU, Iowa State. Look, BYU keeps finding ways to win, but you couldn't have dreamed up a better spot for Iowa State. Coming off the bye week, extra time. I'm torn on that game because it seems like I've been trying to look for spots to fade BYU, and they keep getting me. But it feels like at some point, I could see them slipping up, tripping up. Maybe that's the game. So those are a couple I'm interested in. Lean Iowa State. I haven't bet it yet, but I have bet Mississippi State. Anything on those two games and any other game you want to mention before we turn to NFL?
Real quick, just a positive for the Mississippi State side. Texas is going to be without what some consider to be the number one defensive back in the country, Michael Taft. Going to have thumb surgery here, so they'll be without him. It's a team that's leaned on defense all season.
And he's
long.
A vocal leader. He's the one that was saying after the Kentucky game, there's too many of you, the negative Nellies here. We won the game, kind of like Kelly earlier this year, for LSU, yeah.
And I will throw this out. The bettors have gotten to this game, Ian, and they continue to get to it. I myself came up with a 5 yesterday, but South Florida to me is just a different beast in that conference. Memphis may be the second best team, but we saw South Florida early on this year. Alex Golesh seems to have the defense in a place now where they're good enough to be able to let the offense create the margin here. They can get enough stops. In other words, I guess is what I'm trying to say in simple terms. Memphis, to me, still can't get those stops. This number's gone from 3.5 now to 6.
And Brendan Lewis hurt, so A.J. Hill had to play for Memphis. Yeah. Yep.
It's absolutely crazy how much better I think that they are than any other team in that AAC. So I did play South Florida. Be careful. You don't want this thing to climb too much. So you don't want it
I
to be
agree.
6.5.
That's already on the card for me. I got it, I think, 4.5 at South Florida. Totally agree with the move. I just think they're better. And here we go again with Ryan Silverfield. Just when he's got you believing in Memphis again, there's that loss that you just cannot explain. And it was last week against UAB. How about UAB, by the way? They get Dilfer out of there, and one game they win outright as a 3-touchdown underdog. How bad was Trent Dilfer that is happening in their first game without him? A 3-touchdown underdog outright winner against Memphis last week. Way to go to Mort's son, Chris Mortensen, the great
Absolutely.
insider on ESPN all those years, and his son Alex, the interim coach there at UAB. So maybe he's got a future. That's pretty damn impressive. He's able to do that. His first game as an interim head coach.
Yeah. Real quick, last one, Ian, before we move on,
Yeah.
I'll just throw out there the Houston Cougars +7 against Arizona State, a team without Jordan Tyson here for Sam Levitt to throw to. And I just think that the Big 12, you're coming off the high of beating Texas Tech, who a lot of people thought might run the table here. So for ASU, it's a little bit of a letdown spot. Houston's so good defensively. And Willie Fritz +7, I can put my trust in that, even if it's on the road.
That's another one I agree with you with. Fritz is a dog. I'm interested. Off the big win against Texas Tech. Favorite role has been a little shaky at times for the Sun Devils this year. So, yeah, I think Houston their defense can keep them in that game. I'll throw out just a couple NFL games that I like, and then I'll give you a couple, and then we'll do best bets and wrap up the show. Just for Sunday right now in the NFL, I think the Bills in either first half Buffalo or Buffalo double result to lead at half and win the game. I think they're going to get healthier. They're off 2 losses in a row against the Pats and the Falcons before their bye week. I think it's set up perfectly for this Buffalo Bills team. Carolina's, to their credit, they beat Dallas, who are defensively challenged, and the Jets, who are a dead corpse on the football field right now, and it was an ugly win to boot. Not to mention Bryce Young got hurt in that game for the Panthers as well. So I think it sets up nicely for Buffalo. I think a first half full game point spread split or a Buffalo double result. I've definitely got that on my radar for Sunday. Rob, anything in the NFL you want to throw out there?
I'll just stay on that game because I played it a different way. I played the Bills team total over 27.5. They had 4 games straight with 30 or more up until the last couple. I think coaches always try to fix what's broke right now to Sean McDermott. Let's get the offense back rolling. This is the perfect team to do it against, right? That offensive line for the Bills should dominate Carolina defensively. As you mentioned, still a little bit soft on that defensive side. I mean, allowing 6 to the Jets is more a verdict on the Jets than it is on the Carolina defense. So for me, it was Buffalo team total over 27.5. And I like the Falcons here this week. Ian, I don't know if it's just because I want to play against Miami or if I want to play Atlanta so much, but I do know that the matchup I want to play is the Atlanta ground game against the Miami run defense. Bijan Robinson was held quiet on Monday night. I don't think that happens here this week. So Atlanta -7.5 to me was, if there's going to be a blowout on Sunday, I think that might be it.
Well, I think it was my best bet side last week. It was Cleveland. Cleveland is a short favorite against Miami. Yeah. I figured, you know what, this is the chance for offense to get going, for Dylan Gabriel to settle in, and more importantly, we saw what Quinshon Judkins did on the ground for Cleveland in that game. That's a horrible Miami run. There's a lot of things. They don't do anything well. They don't stop the run well. They don't stop the pass well. They don't protect Tua well. They can't run it, consistently. They've been okay at times running it, but not consistently. I guess that's the one thing they've done a little bit is run the football. Everything else they're bad at. I'm with you. That's Atlanta or pass. That's a one-way game for me. At what point do we put up the stop sign, Rob, with Dallas overs with the 47 to the 51 move with Dallas Denver?
We don't. I mean, we look for 50.5 because they're still available and we don't want to bid into the key, but we really don't. And just to add to that, because Denver has been a team that since Bo Nix got there last year, generally scores points or bullies bad defenses. Now, simply put, they didn't do it against the Jets' bad defense in London. They came back home last week. They got shut out 3 quarters and then put up 33 on the Giants in the fourth quarter, But I do think Dallas isn't looking to stop people. They're looking to outscore people. So 50.5, if you can get that 50.5, go ahead and bet it. You don't want to wait, take the 51. That's tough betting on the key.
I also agree with the Giant Eagle over. I've already bet that, the
Hmm.
Giant Eagle over for Sunday in the NFL. I think that's one I'll be interested in as well. Great stuff. All right, best bets to wrap it up. Like I said, we could have gone longer, but we're out of time. Best bets to wrap things up, Rob. It can be anything in football this weekend. What do you like to give out for a best bet?
Yeah, I'm going to give you what we just talked about here, Ian. NFL Sunday, Buffalo Bills team total over 27.5. I think they get right back to that form of 30 plus. James Cook has his way on the ground. Josh Allen finds his receivers. That balanced offense clicks, and the defense may, as bad as it's been, this may be a perfect elixir type team for them to maybe force a couple of turnovers and help the offense out. So for me, best bet will be Buffalo team total up and over 27.5.
Bills team total over for Rob with his best bet. And mine, I'll go to college, and I'll go to, I think, one of my favorite sides on Saturday. It's just been, we've been fading Nebraska as bigger favorites with great success. And I like Nebraska, or Northwestern, I should say, plus 7.5. There's even a couple eights, but 7.5 is the prevailing number. Northwestern to once again make life difficult on Nebraska in the favorites role, where they have struggled now multiple weeks in a row. So Nebraska plus 7, or Northwestern plus 7.5.
There you
There
go.
we go. Let's get it right. Let's not confuse people. Northwestern plus 7.5 against Nebraska for my best bet. Rob, this is a blast. Like I said, we try to get you on once a month here on the Football Frenzy. We'll get you back in November. By that time, we're closing in on the end of the college football season, regular season by then. NFL, we're coming down to the last third of the season at that point. So when we see you again in November, we're getting really to the home stretch in both NFL and college football. You know what? We might aim for the week before the Grey Cup starts. That way we can
Oh,
get a
nice.
CFL Grey Cup preview in with you, one last CFL discussion with you, along with NFL and college football. So we'll aim for that week to get you back on in November. But great, it's great stuff as always.
Thanks for having me, and I appreciate it. Hopefully, we steer your audience in the right direction. I can't wait to do it again.
For Rob Vino, I'm Ian Cameron. This has been another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. Enjoy the games and good luck, and we'll see you next week once again for another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy.